Okay, started.
Okay, so this is the mask pattern that I made. A lot of people are using a pattern like this. So this is, when it's opened up like this, that is for the front panel, but I've been also folding it and making the back panel patterned as so you can reverse the mask. So for the front panel, for the lining and for the outside that you would use your pattern fabric if you choose, you want to pin it down. I like to double layer so that I can cut two at once, but sometimes I cut four depending on if it's just this stuff. And pin it down. And hopefully I don't cut my fingers like I did on a rotary thingy yesterday, because that was fun. And I already have the smaller lining. If Elizabeth puts the camera over here, I already have the smaller lining cut out for this mask. So all I need to do now is cut out this lining and then the two patterns that I'm choosing. I will say that for this part, if you want to make it for a man or somebody with a bigger head like Lane over there, then add an extra ½ inch to your pattern. You don't really have to do it for this part, but for the lining, but you do have to do it for this, so you have that extra bit when we fold it over with our band. In my pattern, I included the seam allowance, but you can make a pattern and then test it out and wear one to see if it's comfortable to you. And this is the part that I was talking about. You can add an extra inch outward, keep these two ends about the same, but you can add that little bit out to make more room for a thick filter if you really wanted to do that. And I'm not making to put in a filter, but you could still add one if you really wanted to. Might not be the most comfortable though. Do the same thing, pinning and cutting. Hopefully this is slow enough because I'm pretty slow. My bad. Now normally I place the pattern on the fabric to get the most out of each piece of fabric, but with the patterns that are kind of like this one, all facing one direction instead of scattered upside down and right side up stuff, I have to do it this way. Let's So it wastes a bit more fabric just to get it to look nice. Okay, now we have the front panel all cut out, ready to go. And I just need to cut out the back panel. Now this is 4 layers thick of 100% cotton. 2 more than what most hospitals are asking for. There's some hospitals that are asking for 4, but I tried it out just to make sure it was comfortable before I did it. And breathable, because no one wants to suffocate. Now, if you're making one for a kid, this pattern, the way it is right here, if you take an extra, you don't even have to, you could just cut the same pattern, and then instead of sewing along, because I make all my seams a 1/4 inch. So instead of doing a 1/4 inch, you could do a 1/2 inch or a full inch if you wanted to for a child. So I'm folding my pattern. I need to make a new pattern because it's starting to get really worn. Make sure it's lined up. I don't know if it matters what pictures go on it this time, but yeah. Okay, finish cutting the pattern. Get a bit off there. And trim up this edge right here. And the reason I do less on the inside pattern, because when you flip it back to where it's going on the outside, you're going to end up folding and then sewing across. I'll show you in a little bit and you will see. Okay, get this out of the way. Now that we have our patterns cut out, the back panel and the front panel, we're going to put right sides together. Make sure that the corners are lined up because those are the more important parts right there. And then if this part doesn't line up, as long as the corners line up, it's still pretty easy to sew along and get it looking nice and catch all the edges with your sewing machine. Now I like to make sure that all my pins, because I'm going to pin across now to hold it in place, I like to make sure all my pins are on the top, because I like to start on this side when I use the sewing machine, because sometimes if I start on this side, which I have, then it bunches up in the corner and I have to sit there and try to fix it. So just try to do that on this side where there is no corner to start. I mean, if you do start on this side, then you can start a little further down, back stitch, and then go over it again. Okay, and repeat over here. Right sides facing each other. I should iron this, but I am tired, and after this I'm taking a nap. So right sides facing together, and then put the liner on it again. This isn't necessary. I'm just doing it to add the extra 4th layer by putting it on every piece so that you can have that extra bit of protection. Later I can make a video on how to do the pocket if you want. The pocket is really easy. It's just, it takes a lot. It doesn't take a lot more time, but if you're making like 10 or 15 of these in a day, it might get irritating. I was also at my work, we have the masks that are no fog masks, and I was thinking of testing it out on one of these. And so the no fog part of the mask, all it is a very thin, very, very, very thin piece of foam that goes across the bridge of the nose area and down your face to like a little bit past your cheek, like where your glasses would sit on your face. It goes across your face there. Gonna test that out later. Okay, now if you want to come over here so that they can watch. Now I'm going to sew about a 1/4 inch, back stitching as I go. Take my pins out before I poke myself. And do the next one. About a 1/4 inch. You can also go in more on the seam on this, like an inch if you wanted to, for a kid, depending on the size of the kid. You really just make all the seams at that point instead of a 1/4 inch. Just test it out and go a little bit more on the seam allowance. Out my pins, and this is the part that I don't like, but I do it. If Elizabeth's getting it on video, because she's just staring the thing off to whatever this is on my sewing machine. So you are going to want to line up the seams, and I like to make one seam go the opposite way of the other, otherwise it gets really bulky. And then you're going to want to pin. You start with the top nose part of the mask right here where it goes up, and pin all the way down on both sides. If I can gather my things. Okay. Now, if you have the time to use the iron, then that would be great. But if you don't, it doesn't really matter. Putting it in the wash and then just folding the mask after it's completely finished and just kind of pushing it down on the table works. And when someone wears it, it's gonna get flatter. So it doesn't really matter. But if you do want the seams to lie a little flatter, then that would be nice. Okay, and then you're going to want to line up. Oh, forgot to cut that off. Okay, now you're going to want to line up the seams again right here. But you want to make sure that if it's going this direction, then push this one that direction. And then this one the opposite. And pin. Kind of making a pillowcase, except for there's 2 open ends instead of 1. Make sure everything's lined up as you're pinning along the edge of the fabric, at least as best you can. Apparently a lot of people have been kind of using this pattern. I didn't know it until like just today. I saw a news article with some people making basically the same pattern. I think it's because it's more comfy. I like to do the bottom edge first because it's less irritating than the top edge. So I'm going to start with that one. But if you want to save the best for last, be my guest. That's pulled. Oh man, someday when I get a new sewing machine that has the little thing that rips the thread on the side of it, it's gonna be so nice. Oh my god. Okay, now do the irritating side. Make sure that if you didn't pin on the corners like I didn't, make sure that you don't have any hidden flaps underneath of your layers of fabric that folded when you shove it in there and start your sewing. Okay. Is it still recording? I try to keep the needle on the corner, like when I go along this edge up to this seam that I made earlier, and I try to keep the needle there so I can just rotate it instead of going in a loop because I've messed up before. Okay, now that that is done, put my threads that are just hanging there. Most of these will get covered up when you flip it inside out, but I don't like the really long ones just dangling around. You're going to turn it inside out. Now at this point, you could put it up to either your face, or if you're making it for a child and you don't know if it will fit them, you could put it up to their face. And if, when you hold it by the ends, let's see, when you hold it by the ends, right here and here, if it is too big on the chin, or if it just feels too big overall, you could turn it back inside out and add one more seam going another 1/4 inch in, and that would make the mask a lot smaller. And then you don't have to touch this part at all. So, what's that rubber band? The hair tie that I've been using, or that I'm going to start using for every mask now, because it is cheaper and way more efficient. Way more efficient. So I fold this edge. If you're not super good at folding it, making sure all the seams are pushed out, then I would suggest ironing it, but I am not going to iron this one. So you fold the edge, and then you could put a pin here and a pin here as a placeholder so it stays folded, because you are going to have to set your rubber band in there and then fold it one more time over. Now, I don't normally pin it because I kind of got okay at just holding it in place while I'm at the sewing machine, but I'm going to pin it for the video. So I'm going to pin one end. You can pin both ends if you'd like. And then I'm going to put this piece under the sewing machine so it kind of holds it in place. Making sure you don't catch the band, because you want it to be loose so that you can pull through and tighten as you need it. Try to go as close to the edge, maybe a little less than a 1/4 inch in, a little less than a 1/4 inch from the edge of the fold, and start sewing. And making sure I don't catch the band. Now, if you feel like a kid is going to be yanking on this a lot, adults, I wouldn't see the need for it, but for kids, you could add another seam right next to the one that you just did. So right next to, but going inward towards the band, or out away from the mask towards the band. You could add one more seam for stability and structure to the mask. Now I got my first band placed. I'm gonna place the other one.
Do you need another one? Or
no, it's gonna be the same band. You're using the same band, you're looping it, so that's the tricky part. So hold this in place, bring my band all the way back up. This is part of what I'm saying. You might want to use the pins, otherwise you're going to be working the cloth a little bit. And then I fold it over. Use a pin to hold it in place right there. Then I'm going to pinch this end. If you have little pieces that might tuck out like that, just tuck them back in. It'll get caught by the machine when you start going. And if it doesn't, you can clip it. No one will even know. Okay, I'm going to start sewing, back stitching, making sure that the back stitch happens, because I have accidentally had to redo a mask because of that. Fun stuff. Okay. Oh, let me just pause this for a second because I don't think you want to see me refill a bobbin.